Hello and welcome to part 2 of our discussion. I'm Angel, or Jay. We're going to have to decide who we're going to call ourselves in these kind of podcast type things. He's Lawnie.
Or we could just leave this bit in.
He's Lawnie / James. So yeah, you decide how you want to call us, and maybe we'll decide definitively what we're going to call ourselves in these kind of podcasts. But yeah, welcome to part 2, and we're going to resume now our discussion on the top 5 Star Trek games according to us, and because we are the definitive authority on top Star Trek games.
Absolutely. That is beyond a shadow of a doubt. I see no issue with this, and personally, I agree with what you're saying.
Excellent. Let's go.
Well, Jay, I have not finished talking about Armada.
Oh, do tell.
Even if you have.
Do tell.
Because my number 3 is Star Trek Armada 3.
Isn't that technically a mod for a game?
That's correct, Jay. It's a 2013 fan mod for Sins of a Solar Empire, which coincidentally is one of the best strategy games set in space ever. And it's a real-time strategy meets 4X strategy where big spaceships go flying through a galaxy, colonizing planets, killing each other, and it just lends itself perfectly for the Star Trek universe.
I have played Star Trek Armada 3 on several occasions. It is a fantastic mod, I do agree. I didn't realise we were including mods in this, otherwise I might have actually included something else, because there's one for Stellaris as well, a Star Trek mod, which is also fantastic, which also combines 4X and real-time strategy.
I think we should just take an aside and say, hey, look, do you like Stellaris? Then look, here's Star Trek Stellaris. You know?
Yes, recommend both. But yeah, Sins of a Solar Empire is a great game, and there are many good mods for it. But Star Trek Armada 3 is definitely one of them. It's been very well done by the modders of that particular community, and you got all the ranges of ships. I think it's simply got the Klingons, the Federation, the Romulans, and the Cardassians, and the Borg. Am I right? Is there a 6th one?
No, I believe you're right. There's 5 there, and It just feeds into that whole... Do you remember way back in the day, they had these little model ships that you'd get? Like these tiny little ones that you get, like micro machines, but Star Trek.
Yes.
It feeds into that. People... Hold on, the cat's meowing. What I found in game modding in general is there's 3 sort of seriously into their mods groups of people. One of them is Star Trek fans.
Absolutely.
One of them is Star Wars fans. And then to a slightly lesser extent, you've got the Lord of the Rings fans. And it feels like those 3 franchises, while they've had good games, there's this fan demand. It's like if they can mod another game to make it more like a Star Trek overhaul or a Star Wars overhaul, they'll do it. And a lot of these mods and a lot of these games are better than the official products.
Yes. I believe there's one called the TIE Fighter Total Conversion, which is a good example of that.
No. I don't know if you've seen it lately, but they've done this concourse thing with animations, and it's way too cluttered, and it's no good.
Yes, I agree, because I just started playing a Star Wars mod for X4 Foundations, and so far I'm quite impressed with it. It's, yeah. The X games are basically kind of EVE Online but offline in a way, because you get to do empire building and control lots of ships, and it's good. But yeah, I agree. I agree. These 2 or 3 franchises tend to get a lot of modding attention, and deservedly so, because there's so much there to work with.
One of my subscribers recently, I did a video on SourcePorts, and you don't have to link it or anything, but they mentioned that they'd never played Open XCOM before, but they were a massive fan of XCOM, and I find that a lot of people who are into things don't necessarily know everything that's out there for that, so there will be people watching this video, and they'll see, oh, I'm into Star Trek games, I'll look at this, but they'll not be aware of the modding community around Star Trek. They'll not be aware that some of the games they might play actually have Star Trek mods that they could sink another 100 or 200 hours into, you know?
Yep. Homeworld's another example.
So, Jay, what's your next number? What a seamless transition.
That was a beautiful transition. Lovely. My next one is a Final Unity.
That's funny, Jay, because my next one is a Final Unity.
Oh, wow. What a coincidence. We can talk about a Final Unity then. This game came out in May 1995, made by Spectrum Holobyte, which then eventually became Hasbro, I think? Or was it the other way around? Let me have a look at my notes here. Yes, Spectrum Holobyte was then bought up by Hasbro.
They were also heavily involved with Microprose. So
Yes.
when you're playing a Final Unity, you are sort of playing a Microprose game, so you can expect that degree of quality.
Yes, I did a Let's Play of this earlier in the year, also a review of it, and I love this game. It has a lot of flaws, and as I mentioned earlier, there was another game with terrible ship combat. It's this game. It's in the same vein as the 25th anniversary games. It's a point-and-click adventure game, and it has all the original cast of the Next Generation, minus Will Wheaton. No real great loss there, I have to admit.
You know, Will Wheaton is going to be heartbroken when he sees this video.
I'm sorry, if you ever listen to this, Will Wheaton, I do apologise. I, for one, never hated Wesley Crusher that much. I know, controversial statement, but yeah.
Jay, speaking of videos, that video of your review of Final Unity and your playthrough of Final Unity and my video review of Final Unity are all linked in the description, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And you can see them in the description of the video, I'm sure.
That's exceedingly convenient.
Yes, it is. But yes, Final Unity, the Enterprise picks up a distress call from a race called the Garidians, who are suspiciously using all Romulan-designed ships. I'm sure the Romulans are just, happy giving out their technology. They basically want you to go and find this fifth scroll, which will help them get rid of the yokes of oppression from their people. Because obviously we obey the Prime Directive, we're not gonna obviously interfere with someone's. Oh yes, we totally do. Yeah, we go and find this fifth scroll, and it causes some serious problems if you do it.
Screw the Prime Directive. We have a video game to play.
I know, but there's also this mysterious race, which you've already mentioned in Generations, I believe, called the Chodak. They were an ancient race, kind of, I think, like around the era of Takon Empire, an Iconian Empire, that sort of hundreds of thousands of years ago sort of thing. Basically, it turns out we're all trying to find this super weapon called the Unity device, which is basically a Dyson sphere-sized device which can alter space and time and unmake the galaxy if it wanted to. It's a great game. I really like the Chodak. I love the design of the Chodak. They're properly alien. There's some great artwork in the game. I really wish the Chodak were a canon race, because I think they're a fascinating race. I think they'd have made a great effect on the power dynamics of the Star Trek universe.
It would have been really impressive if a special effects team had been able to create the Chodak.
Yes.
In their funny pod things.
I mean, I guess it's kind of similar to the way the Tholians are portrayed. The Enterprise actually showed us the Tholians in CGI, and there's a similar sort of design going on there, kind of egg-shaped creatures. But yeah, I understand it would have been very expensive and possibly not aged so well. But yes, but the ship combat is terrible. It's I did enjoy it as a kid, just because I like space pew pew. But playing it as an adult, it's fiddly, it's cumbersome. There's wonderful attention to detail. You have this engineering section which has all these different power bars and settings that you can adjust for more power to your shields or your weapons and engines. But the combat itself, you don't really have a chance to really do any of this, because the combat's still going on, and Worf can take over and everything, but the AI is not the best, and yeah, terrible combat. There's also a stellar cartography section. We've already talked about stellar cartography, and
we have,
yes, and there are literally hundreds of star systems you can go and visit, which doesn't matter at all, really. You can't really do anything. That there are random encounters that you can fly into Romulan space and get attacked by Romulans. I think you can encounter a Klingon and even a Ferengi ship, but that's it. I suppose you could go and fly to a black hole and get killed. There's a couple of star bases where you can go and repair the ship and fill up your torpedo complement again. But otherwise, it's a very linear story. Despite the fact you have free movement wherever you want to go.
But it's the quality of that story that makes up for it, right?
Yes.
It's like an episode or 3 episodes of Next Gen, and it's set in the time period, right?
Yes, it's set just after, I think it's like early season 7, is when it's set. If you're playing this game as a non-Star Trek fan, you'll probably find it's average at best. If you're a Star Trek fan, you probably love this game.
It's probably the best, in my opinion, it's the best depiction of a Star Trek episode.
Yes.
It does all the right beats correctly, even to the point where it just flashes up at the beginning with a final unity, and then you've got the bridge crew and everything, and you've got the view screen that you talk to people on, and there's so many elements of it that are just like a Star Trek The Next Generation episode in terms of both the way that it looks and the way that it sounds as well.
Yeah, and another little detail, like when you're on the away teams, every little character has their own tics from the show. Like LaForge is clasping his hands in front of himself. Picard will do his Picard maneuver. Data has his kind of, his scanning. Worf's got his phaser out. Everyone has their body language. They've studied the body language of each of these people. The real Star Trek fans. I did try to reach out to some of the developers to try and get some information about this when I did Let's Play, but I never, unfortunately, got any information back on that, because I really wanted to understand the development of this game, particularly the whole stellar cartography stuff.
When you talk about Data's animation, you are going to include the clip of when Data gets shot from your playthrough and collapses in a heap.
Yes.
And then Geordi looks at him and says it's Data.
Yes. I believe Data holding the tricorder, though, it's left-handed, because Brent Spiner's left-handed and Data's shown as left-handed, so yeah, he's holding the tricorder in his left hand. Wonderful attention to detail.
And then, of course, they also have Karlstrom there as well, which is, well, who could forget Karlstrom from The Next Generation?
Butler and Karlstrom.
Yes, Butler. Remember that scene with Butler and Deanna in the holodeck? I think it was season 3. That's tremendous. No. Also, Jay, I briefly need to talk to you before we continue speaking about a final unity, because I have noticed again anti-Romulan sentiment. Look, there's pretty obvious collusion between the Garidians and the Romulans. The Romulans have been benefactors, they have shared their technology with the Garidians, they have been kind to the Garidians, and you just refuse to see that.
I remain prejudiced against the Romulans. Dishonourable scum, that's what they are. I'm with the Klingons on this one.
Were some of your family in the Khitomer massacre or something?
I can't talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
But you only briefly touched on the art, and it's worth mentioning again. They move, and it must be said, this is a point-and-click Star Trek The Next Generation adventure, which came out literally a few years after the point-and-click Star Trek adventures from Interplay that we mentioned at the start of the video about 6 hours ago. And the art style has changed. You had bright, colourful, cartoonish VGA graphics with the early 90s titles. Here you'd moved up to something like SVGA. I believe it was Visa as well, video mode that's almost impossible to emulate. And the art, as a result, was able to go where the TV series couldn't. Things become increasingly bizarre, right from the get-go. You're talking to random animals on a zoo planet that you really enjoyed, Jay.
Yeah. Like I said, it has the game has its flaws, and the planet of Marasia is one of them. Low point of the game. But yes, I take your point about the artwork. It's a significant change in both tone and appearance, but I think for the better.
If the scriptwriters had taken this script with the Chodak, they could have made a 3-parter, stuck it into season 7 or wherever, and nobody would have batted an eyelid, I feel. It's that strong, the story.
Yeah.
Sometimes in games, story feels a bit throwaway and a bit, whatever. But this is genuinely as good as some episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. But the pacing is even slower. It's even more contemplative.
Yes, there's just a lot of talking in this game, and it's great because Star Trek is a lot of talking.
Fully voiced talking as well. The cast, it's like they've taken that inspiration from the Interplay crew. The Interplay crew got the original cast, and the original cast, except maybe William Shatner, all did a very good job.
Yeah.
And it was well received. So when the Next Generation cast it came time to voice. I feel like their voice director or somebody said to them, look, just treat this like an episode. You know, don't have throwaway lines. Have real inflection, embody your characters. And this came out just after Next Gen ended and just after the movie, I believe.
About that sort of time.
They weren't 25 years older than the people they were trying to play, which helped.
No, they'd just come off the back of playing these characters for 7+ years, so...
But you're right, though. I mean, if you're a point-and-click adventure fan and you play this and you're not really into Star Trek... You know, you might still enjoy it because as a point-and-click adventure game, it is strong. It's a strong game in its own right, irrespective of whether it's Star Trek or not. But if you have that TNG obsession, then it is literally like living in an episode. It's wonderful.
It's an absolute must-play for a TNG fan, in my opinion. And just one thing more about the Chodak, I think they did a really good job of fleshing out the Chodak as a culture, from what we do learn of them. Brilliant stuff all round. Except the ship combat and one of the planets, and yeah.
So Jay, I feel like we've come to an important realization here, and that is we were talking about the Unreal Engine before, and we were talking about things based on id Tech 3, and I feel we both have the same number one here.
I'm going to have to disappoint you and say that this isn't... I know what you're going to say. It's Star Trek Elite Force, right?
No!
Is not my number one.
What?
It is my number 2. Number 1, you go and take a number 2.
You know what this means, Jay? This means that your number 1 isn't even on my list.
Quite probably, yes. In fact, I know for a fact it's not on your list, so...
So, Jay, tell me about Star Trek Voyager Elite Force.
Okay, well, as you said, id Tech, it's on running Quake 3 engine, or variant of the Quake 3 engine, came out in September 2000 and developed by Raven Software and published by Activision. You are on the USS Voyager and you are captured and taken to this random area of space where the ship is basically crippled and these insect-like things want to basically assimilate your ship. And along the way, you get to go on some other ships, fight some Borg, fight some mirror universe humans, Klingons, and is it Malon as well?
Good grief.
I can't remember.
Well, it has been 22 years.
One of the levels is basically this hybrid of 3, there's a mirror universe Constitution class with a Klingon bird of prey and another ship. And I think it's the Malon. Or is it something else? I honestly can't remember. I'm gonna get comments in the comments section probably saying, no, it's not them.
How could you forget? You're gonna have the Malon attack force on you in the YouTube comments. How dare you forget?
And I believe also Species 8472 also make an appearance. And you fight them on a Borg ship because, hey, why not? Star Trek Online gives them an actual name.
Did you know Raven Software were really, really good at making first-person shooters? Back in the day, they had a bunch of guys from id helping them, and they made Heretic, which is one of my favourite DOS shooters of all time. They followed it up with Hexen, which is another excellent game if you're into key and switch hunting and such. And then they had a certain other game after Elite Force, which we're both kind of fond of, which is called Jedi Outcast.
Yeah, I know that game. I may have run a few servers on that and...
Vaguely familiar with that. What about that video of your lightsaber combat that has all those views, Jay? Do you want to overlay some of that?
Yes, my second highest number of views on a video of me randomly playing multiplayer lightsaber combat. Great game, but the Undine, that's what they're called, or Undine. That's what Star Trek Online called them.
Thanks for finding that out.
Yes, that took all of 1 minute to find.
I was going to talk more about Elite Force with my cliff notes here, but
I got what I wanted. So yes, Elite Force, good game, good first-person shooter. There's some fun combat in it. You start off with basically, obviously, a hand phase and a phaser rifle, but you end up getting some cooler stuff. I mean, it's a typical of that era kind of first-person shooter where you end up carrying like a dozen weapons. They kind of explain this by, how can a Star Trek crew member be carrying all these Star Trek weapons? Well, it's easy. They just store them in like this personal transporter buffer. And every time you want to switch weapons, it just you dematerialize your weapon, materialize a new weapon. And that's really cool. I thought that was a really cool way to explain in lore how are they carrying all these weapons. Because obviously these first-person shooters never really go to the effort of explaining how Gordon Freeman is carrying the crowbar and the shotgun and the machine gun and then the alien things and so forth. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. My favourite weapon was the personal photon torpedo launcher. Because why not? That's basically the rocket launcher of the game, but it had a nice meaty sound and it sounded like a torpedo firing from a starship, and I loved it.
It's funny you should bring up Gordon Freeman, actually, because it's in my cliff notes here that this was heavily influenced by Half-Life, because one of the important parts of the campaign is that rather than relying on FMV like a lot of the earlier Star Trek games, they had a lot of in-game cutscenes, a la Half-Life, scripted in-engine sequences that basically ran like Star Trek episodes did, with dialogue and flowed like, and were directed like a proper episode of Trek in between all the FPS shooting.
Didn't it do both? It had basically cutscenes you had no control over, and also there was talking where you could just run around the room whilst they talked.
This was another thing as well, because in certain cutscenes, you did have choices.
Yes.
And I didn't realize this at the time, because in FPSs, you don't really have choice and consequence. So I was just playing through like an ordinary FPS until I shot somebody that I wasn't meant to because I was messing around, and the game just continued. And I was like, oh.
I think that's on the Mirror Universe Klingon ship. It's you're supposed to kind of sneak around, but you can just go fuck it and start just shooting your way through if you want to.
And that was rarely seen in the genre, and it's really, really cool. Just to take us back a little bit, you are Ensign Alex Monroe. You are a member of Hazard Team. And for those who have not watched Star Trek Voyager for some reason, because they hate coffee or women or whatever, Voyager is sent into the Delta Quadrant, which is full of hostile bad guys. So there is an actual canon explanation as to why something like Hazard Team would be formed in the first place.
Is this Hazard Team mentioned in the series at all?
I don't know.
No.
Oh. They would have been really good in an episode like Scorpion or something,
Yes, if they'd had it. It's a shame that sometimes games don't tie into they don't tie into the TV show as well. The TV show brings elements from games.
They didn't show the dolphins in Star Trek The Next Generation, but they were real.
I do remember there was one mission I didn't like. It's the Marassia of this game. For me, and that was they're on this kind of bioship, and there's these creatures that basically remind me of the Equinox episode with Captain Ransom.
Yes.
These creatures which keep phasing in and out and attacking you. You shoot them with a phaser, they disappear, but they just keep coming back and they just keep swarming you all the time. I didn't like that mission at all. It was kind of a slog to get through that one. The rest of the game now is great. Loved it.
That's the thing, though. It is a sort of Raven Software thing that they do. Sometimes they'll have missions, and it's like get good missions, where they artificially limit you or handicap you or provide the enemy with some kind of horrific advantage, and you're just like endlessly frustrated by it. But then once you slog through it at the end, there's a sort of sense of achievement.
Yes.
I felt the same with Nar Shaddaa and Jedi Outcast, It was like, oh, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah, and Nar Shaddaa is definitely a good example of a terrible mission. Getting sniped all the time, which you cannot block with a lightsaber at all.
And there's 8 missions and 30 levels, Jay, which is a lot of content compared to the shooters of nowadays. The Call of Duties, which ironically are also developed by Raven.
Yes.
What's left of Raven, those poor souls.
Did you play a lot of multiplayer, Elite Force?
I didn't finish the single player because I was too busy playing the deathmatch mode.
Yeah.
And I do want to talk about this because the deathmatch mode was a work of art. Absolutely brilliant. You could select all kinds of characters from Star Trek. Not just Voyager, like all kinds of people that had nothing to do with Voyager. And if you'd never played a Quake 3 arena game, or you'd never played an Unreal tournament or whatever, then this was just this groundbreaking experience. It came out just as the 3D acceleration was starting to get in vogue, and the frame rates were starting to smooth out, and multiplayer was starting to become a thing. Counter-Strike existed, Quake existed, and you now had what was essentially Quake Deathmatch, but with a Star Trek skin. And you could even have Voyager itself as one of the levels, and you could go running around destroying Klingons and the Doctor and God knows what else with this enormous arsenal of weaponry. It had this crossover appeal. And that's the thing about Elite Force and some of the games that we've mentioned, like towards the latter end of this list. They are not just good Star Trek games. They're good games that happen to have a Star Trek skin, and they have this crossover appeal. Like fans of the genre who aren't necessarily into Star Trek could jump into Elite Force Deathmatch and they would have a lot of fun. If Elite Force Deathmatch was still a thing now, then, people could jump in and have fun with it. I think it's timeless. I really do. I loved it.
I did actually play a bit of Elite Force about a year ago. I had tried a couple of years before, but I couldn't get it to run properly. But there are some mods which help make it work and also make it look a bit better as well.
Do you remember the fact that GOG.com re-released Elite Force and made it run on normal computers?
Yes, I'm sure we can do that.
Should probably do that.
Yeah, we can do that. Do you remember that you can blow up the ship?
Yes.
You can set the self-destruct sequence?
Yes, I've done that. That was great fun. It's little touches like that make you think, oh, this is fantastic.
Or you could just attack any one of the crew and then instantly everyone's firing at you and you just get this endless wave of security officers beaming in and you just put God mode on. But that doesn't work because they'll still kill you even with God mode on.
Because they had the Quake 3 engine, they were quite, how to put it, they were quite true to the planning of the actual vessel Voyager itself. They were able finally to have an engine where they had the space. Like, if you look at earlier games like Generations, the corridors are a bit narrow, everything's a bit off, because the engine couldn't, function with space that much. And with id Tech 3, they finally had a 3D engine that could render the hallways and the bridge and everything in glorious 3D and make it feel real. And they actually released an expansion where it added like extra decks to Voyager, which had nothing to do with the combat, and you could just wander around. And that's still a thing now. People are still like clamoring for just the ability to wander around the decks. And
yeah, there was that cancelled game because Paramount said no. I think it's called Plan 9?
Stupid Paramount.
I don't remember what it's called. I want to say it's called Plan 9, but I could be completely wrong. But yeah, you could just walk around the entire Enterprise D. Like the entire ship.
It just feels like home for so many of us. There's this sort of warm, homely feel about the Enterprise D, and to a lesser extent, places like DS9 and so on.
Yeah, but the Enterprise D is where you want to live.
Yeah, you just want to inhabit it. You just want to be there. You just want to explore and wander around, not even do much, just the occasional bit of interaction with something, And there's a real market for that. And that kind of thing only first really appeared around the turn of millennium when the technology caught up enough to render it. And that the seed was planted. This idea that, hey, technology really can bring in the world of Star Trek in full 3D for us to just wander about and explore. And I think Star Trek Online leaned into that by releasing, additional bits of content that were from the TV shows. I'm sure, I haven't played it, but I'm sure you can probably wander around Deep Space Nine or whatever, and there's a real appeal there in doing that.
It's a shame Star Trek Elite Force 2 was a failure, comparatively speaking.
Well, it wasn't Raven, was it? I mean, that's the difference, isn't it? Sometimes you can give somebody all the tools, to make something good, and even give them, a reference guide in the previous game, but they lack a certain je ne sais quoi that the other developer did. They just don't have that little spark that makes the player of a game just look and go, wow, they really cared about this, or wow, they really thought this through. And with Elite Force, it felt that way. It was like you were in an episode of Voyager, and there were little details and little things here and there that just made you stop and think, Like you were talking about Brent Spiner's left-handedness. You know, that whether Brent Spiner held that tricorder in his left hand or his right would have made absolutely no difference to how well a final Unity was perceived, or how well it sold, or how the game played. But it's little details like that that fans appreciate, you know, and there's few more rabid than the Star Trek fandom, you know?
Indeed. Anyway, should we move on to my number one?
Hey Jay, what's your number one? Is it a game that I've played?
It is not. At least I don't think it is. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not. It is Klingon Academy.
Jay, would you like to tell us exactly why Klingon Academy is possibly one of the greatest pieces of Star Trek media ever created?
Klingon Academy is basically a sequel to Starfleet Academy, where you basically fly the starships. You have in theory, a bridge crew that you're flying about with, and you get to go on several missions. But the things that stood these games out was the full FMV cutscenes that you had.
Can I interrupt you there and point out that it's really important that we show the ending of Starfleet Academy and the FMV cut sequence of William Shatner turning on the Starfleet cadets and shooting his wide beam phaser, because that is just a tremendous FMV sequence.
Yes, I'm sure I could do that. But yes, Klingon Academy is you playing the Klingon side of things. You are a student of Klingon warfare. You're going to be a ship commander, and for basically the first half of the game, you are trying to learn the ways of being a great ship commander. But what really stands out here is the fact this game is basically a prequel to Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. It literally sets up the events of Star Trek VI: Undiscovered Country. And you have David Warner reprising his role as Chancellor Gorkon, and you have Christopher Plummer reprising his role as General Chang, one of the greatest Star Trek villains ever, quoting Shakespeare as a Klingon. And yeah, the most of the FMVs are just Plummer giving it his all, talking to you and your fellow students, and there's some occasional interactions between Gorkon and Chang. It's wonderful to see. I mean, you can just watch it's like there's 2 hours worth of FMV cutscenes here. It's a 2-hour-long Star Trek movie that sets up the Undiscovered Country.
I do want to point out at this juncture that because Jay had discovered that I hadn't played this game, he did link me to an entire movie which had been constructed from the cutscenes of his game, and it holds up. It holds up and is a beautiful, beautiful little bit between Star Trek V and Star Trek VI that could be watched as a film in its own right, almost, and appreciated.
Yes. Michael Dorn does play a Klingon in this, Commander Thokmuk, who in-game says he's the younger brother to Colonel Worf. So this Thokmuk is a relative of our Worf from TNG. There's a few other actors who show up who have been in Star Trek before, I think. The player character is voiced, it's just a random guy. You never see him on screen. Starfleet Academy had a lot of cast in the FMV cut sequences because you had the captain you were playing, and you had your cadets around you. Klingon Academy only really has Chang, Gorkon, the main antagonist, who's called Melkor, I want to say, and maybe 2 or 3 other students that you interact with. It's a far smaller cast, generally speaking, but I think it's for the better. It has a more focused story as a result. As for the actual game itself, I enjoyed it a lot better than Starfleet Academy. It's obviously an evolution of that engine, and I enjoy it better than Bridge Commander, which is basically this kind of sequel to these games and more modern.
So we're looking at the engine now as you speak about it. Can you tell us a bit about the actual gameplay? I mean, we've talked about the cutscenes a lot. I mean, we could listen to Christopher Plummer and David Warner talk to each other forever if we wanted, but there is an actual game here, and the actual game is good, right?
Yes, I mean, it's basically a flight simulator. You can use a joystick and throttle if you want to. I think you can control it with keyboard and mouse as well. There are a plethora of commands you can give, like your 0 to 9 keys on your keyboard will give you access to various subsystems. You can put power to your engines, shields, weapons, or cloaking, stealth. You can send tractor beams in, or you can beam a party aboard to try and capture a ship. And the combat itself, each ship has shields. You've got front shields, back, rear, forward, ventral, all that sort of stuff. There are different space environments which can actually affect how you play. You can actually, for example, there's a mission when near a black hole, and if you get too close to the black hole, you start getting pulled in. It actually starts more and more the closer you get, it affects your movement. And one of my favorite aspects actually is the ship destruction. You can literally blow chunks of the ships up, and it looks great. Even to this day, it looks great, and somehow looks better than Bridge Commander, which came out several years later. I don't understand how Bridge Commander has such poor looking chunks of ships being blown up, whereas Klingon Academy did it much better. It does have its flaws. The AI has a shocking tendency to ram you frequently when it gets on head-to-head engagements, but it's also pretty tough. It will also use things like tractor beams to stop you moving, and if you grab a ship in a tractor beam, it'll just turn around to engage you and bring all its weapons to bear and just keep hammering you until you let go, or the tractor beam basically disengages. Like any flight sim, you have certain objectives: go here, kill this, capture this. You can even do a bit of planetary bombardment. The first half of the game, as I said, you're basically going through the Academy, and basically General Chang's going through this simulation of invading the Federation, and it basically ends with them using a version of the Genesis device to on Earth, completely obliterating it. After that, it kind of devolves into basically typical Klingon Civil War kind of stuff with some Romulan involvement. Bloody Romulans, I tell you, they're good for nothing.
Enough, poor Romulans. They've done nothing to deserve this.
I gush about this game. I love this game. It's great. George Takei does actually briefly show up in this game, not in FMV, but he's voices Sulu as captain of the Excelsior.
I do have to ask, as somebody who has played a little bit of space combat simulators, you may have dabbled in them. I've heard rumors. How does it compare, the playing of this game, compared to, say, a Wing Commander or a TIE Fighter? How does that differ? Is it like a straight-up clone of that, or is it its own thing?
No, because you have much greater complexity in what you can do. Like I said, you've got all these different commands you can do to your ship, and also because you're piloting a big starship, you're not piloting a fighter craft. They handle that way. I mean, obviously something like a bird of prey is a lot more nimble and you can move back quickly, but the game keeps putting you in bigger and bigger ships, so by the end of it you're in this massive dreadnought battleship which moves like a slug but just obliterates anything in its path.
So why can't we play this game anymore? Why is it not on any digital platforms?
As far as I know, the source code of the engine has been lost. I have seen comments from the actual developers about this. I don't think they have access to the original source code. I don't know what the deal is with the rights of this game. I wouldn't expect to see it digitally released anytime soon. It was made by 14 Degrees East and published by Interplay. I really honestly don't know if we'll actually ever see this game be released in GOG or something like that, which is a real shame.
And that is why Elite Force is superior.
Sure. But yeah, that's Klingon Academy. If you don't want to just play the game, just go and watch the entire movie cutscene about it instead.
So there you go. Not only have you got Star Trek Klingon to watch, you've got Star Trek Borg to watch, you've got Starfleet Academy to watch, and you've got Klingon Academy to watch. I mean, we've just gifted you like 4 movies there to watch.
Yes, that's a good 5 hours of Star Trek easily.
So they'll get through that in one day then, yeah?
Yeah, easily. If you had the time to waste anyway.
Well, it's one thing I know about Star Trek fans is that they don't waste their time. They're very, very careful with that.
Indeed. So that's it. I believe we have concluded our 10-hour-long discussion about our favourite Star Trek games.
Unless you've got a number 0 to go to. I think you're right there, yeah.
Yeah. I've enjoyed this discussion. I hope the 5 or 6 viewers that maybe listen to this whole thing will enjoy this discussion.
We liked the nice English man who was talking, but he kept getting interrupted by some high-pitched whining.
Possibly, or maybe they like the Irish guy talking and the English guy can just shut the fuck up. Who knows?
Ach, no. We'll probably do this again if it's well received. We'll probably talk about something else Star Trek related. Who knows? Maybe, perhaps.
If at least 2 people like this, we might consider doing something else. I mean, we've discussed doing this for ages now, and we finally got sat down and did it. And it was fun. It was fun. I enjoyed doing it.
I enjoyed myself, yeah.
If you would like to make any comments about what you'd maybe like us to talk about next time, or if you have any suggestions about the format, because we've basically just done this as free form as possible. We have our notes and then we just talk. And I think that's the best way to do things, really, because it's a bit more dynamic.
We just winged it. I mean, I'm still interrupting him.
Yeah. And as you can tell, we tend to segue into things quite easily. So we've had to try and control ourselves. Otherwise, this really would be a 10-hour podcast. I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening. If you've listened all the way through, thank you. I'm Angel, also Jay, and he's Lawnie, also James.
Bye.
And maybe we'll see you next time.